Hello, and I just want to say I'm really excited because today I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Elosa and Emma. Hi, guys.
Yeah.
Hello. And hello to all of you out there that are watching this. Um, I guess it's all part of this initiative to be responsive in terms of, the changes and all the uncertainty, the loss and also growth that's going on at the moment. And thank you guys that have emailed to the CPD at noahsarkcentre.org.uk with your questions and maybe some of your, also for the ideas that we're going to try and cover and discuss some of those ideas, and it will really guide us in the future topics that we talk about. But today's topic is going to be all about the thoughts, and I'm sure it's not just us that's thinking that. I'm sure there are loads of people thinking, what will it be like when schools go back and to go back to schools? Yeah, so a very interesting topic that might bring up all sorts of thoughts and feelings, and we certainly want to explore that today. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. I'm Natalie. I'm the Young Person's Council Coordinator at Noah's Ark, and I work with children, teenagers, families, parents, group work, but of all sorts, and obviously supporting the amazing counsellors and volunteers that we've got at Noah's Ark. So guys, if you could introduce yourselves, that would be amazing. Thank you. Perhaps you want to kick us off, Elosa.
Okay. So I'm Elosa. I'm Therapeutic Services Manager at Noah's Ark Centre. And so I manage a lot of the services at the centre, but as well as going into schools. So we're in a lot of secondary schools. I'm one of the counsellors on the this project. And we also go into primary schools, and we've got quite a few projects going on in there as well. And that's where I started my counselling background, actually, before counselling young people or adults, was children in primary schools. I think that kick-started my therapeutic journey. So I've got quite a passion for that side of the work as well.
Excellent, thank you, Elosa. And Emma, tell us a bit about you.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm also from the Noah's Ark Centre. I am part of the ASD team at Noah's Ark, so I work at the centre with families with children and young people with autism, and all the issues surrounding that with them. I also go into secondary and primary schools as well and work with children and young people there, and adults too at the centre. Yeah.
Excellent. So a wealth of experience. Wonderful. So guys, I know you guys have been giving thought to this topic of what it might be like for parents, for children, for young people, and for staff, the thought of schools going back. What do you think are some of the things that come up for us? I mean, I know we've been off for a while now. What will it be like getting all of us back to school?
Well, my initial thoughts are, it really is, I mean, there's so many things uncertain at the moment, isn't there? When are we going to come out of lockdown?
Yeah.
But it's going to be a gradual thing. So are schools going to go back? The whole uncertainty about it, we don't even know when. We don't know, is it going to be in a couple of weeks' time? Is it going to be in a month's time? Is it not going to be until September? Could things be crazy? And it's beyond, we really don't know, and nobody really knows. And I imagine your head teachers and senior management are really grappling with this stuff continuously, how to manage that uncertainty of when the government will then say, right, this is how you're doing it, off you go, this is your plan. So that anxiety, and I think that whole thing around uncertainty is very key here, isn't it? The anxiety of just not knowing and not being able to plan anything.
Yes.
Of the not knowing, because this topic, when we return to schools, when, how, what, who, all that, it then sparks off loads of other questions, won't it, for people? Yeah.
I think you've absolutely encapsulated it so well, Elosa. And there's something about not knowing or uncertainty that us as human beings, we don't like it, do we? We like to know what the plan is. And this is just such unusual situation to find ourselves in when actually we don't know. It's, like you say, it is all uncertain. Emma, what are the things that come up for you when you
I was just thinking as well, it's wanting to know a plan, but it's also trusting that plan as well, that it could be quite scary going back to think in terms of, I mean, there's so much that could make people anxious, but at the centre of it all, there's this pandemic, isn't there, that what if it's too soon, what if that's not safe?
Of course.
So that must be so anxiety provoking for kids, parents and teachers, all of them, to think, what if it's too soon, what if we shouldn't be doing this?
Oh gosh, yeah. Emma, so yeah, that sort of just percolated so much for me, because I thought, what if you've got a sibling, for instance, who is vulnerable, or a parent? What if you're a young carer, you know? Of course, it's going to be different for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm just imagining how anxiety producing that might be for some families and for parents to think, oh my gosh, is my child going to be okay going back to this environment? Yeah.
And I think confusing for schools really to manage that, because obviously the expectation is that children go to school in the normal, you know, in the times before this virus, the normal thing is your child is supposed to be going to school, and
of course.
And this is how it works, you know, your expectation. If you don't send your children to school, you can be fined in the end if you know.
Exactly.
Phone calls from school, why are you not coming? Sure, that whole, you know, kids not coming in because of anxiety, the behaviour that happens in school, you know, that's linked with anxiety often. You just think there's a lot that schools are going to have to handle here. In a different way than how they would ordinarily handle things, because to a certain extent I would imagine it's kind of going to be parents, well, I don't know, I'm saying that because I don't really know, but you wonder, is it going to be parents' prerogative as to whether they send their child to school, because, you know, actually maybe they don't want to the child bringing the virus back home into their house, you know, and who's somebody else to tell them that that's not the correct decision for them to make, you know, if it was, particularly if it was like in the next 2 weeks we're going to have, you know, off you go, are happening, you know, which I would doubt, but it's then who becomes the decision makers, you know, and is it, because it's got this share, there's so much hierarchy really with school, that school kind of make the decisions mostly, and parents have to fall in and children have to fall in, and obviously staff and schools, the hierarchy is above them because they have to meet their targets, and children need to 100%, you know, 96% attendance equals to this level of GCSE and all of that. I mean, how are they going to sell that kind of aspect? You know what I mean?
It's complicated, isn't it?
To some extent, because they are going to have to shift quite heavily, be thinking about and not saying that schools don't do this, but they're really going to have to up the priority of the emotional health and well-being of of how to create the best environment and relationships with parents, and that's not going to be easy. And I don't know, maybe we'll have a bit of ideas will come, you know, spark up, and I kind of see that this might be a bit of an introduction for themes that could be followed on as we know more and as time progresses. But yeah,
I guess I'm also thinking, and I'm just hearing there, that a lot of this might be sort of uncharted territory that we might be going into. I guess it's early days, but some of these are just some of our projected fantasies of what it might be like, and what some of the obstacles might be. Sure. Yeah, and it's worth thinking about, and maybe thinking about, do we do it the way we've always done it before, or are there things that are going to change? Will there be things that will have to change? And what will that look like? Yeah.
Everybody's fantasies will be different. Children and young people's will all be different. Right now, their anxieties, you know, some people may be really looking forward to be going back to school and really just hate this, and other people, they're really worrying about going back to school, you know. So it's going to be very varied. And then teachers' fantasies and school staff and parents' fantasies about what it's going to be like. And I guess that element you were talking about, Natalie, about uncharted territory, that's it. So when you don't know, when we're talking about this uncertainty, massive uncertainty, you do fantasize, you do kind of try to put in, that tendency is to try and put in some kind of plan, even if it's just in your mind of how you would like it to be or wish it to be. And then there'll be that disappointment for those where it doesn't turn out to be how they wished it was going to be. And then there'll also be the catastrophizing that comes with that. Well, it's going to be like, that looking into the future. So there's something I wonder about. There's something about trying to see the lay of the land and what kind of not rushing too far in advance. Because you lose the here and now presence of what the needs are, maybe.
Absolutely.
People, parents, young people, school staff,
I guess it's something about our brains. Well, we like to be in control, so something about our brains filling in some of the gaps to give us a sense that maybe we are more in control than we are, possibly. But and maybe something like you were saying about being mindful of perhaps being more in the present and not so much worrying about what we can't control really, and I guess what will be. But just perhaps thinking and taking it a bit more day by day. Is that what you're sort of saying? So
I think it's trying to I suppose I'm also thinking of it in, so when they return to school, there's going to be planning for that to an extent that schools can do, or parents can. You can foresee, and it's sometimes good to foresee what could happen, the what ifs, but not to get too stuck in them, because you actually still need to be there in the present for your kids right now. Without, because the more you worry about, the more you're not able to be with them in the present. And then when that time actually comes, for example, when they are going back to school, you've got to be, I think there's got to be an open listening kind of communication between all those parties involved, and not a presumption that you already made your plan and this is the solution and this is the way you're going to fix whatever the concerns you've thought are going to happen. But there's got to be an open listening kind of mechanism of taking in what are the concerns on the ground for young people and parents and staff and everybody, so that it is more responsive.
And I'm just hearing that sometimes, when you were saying that, I was just thinking, gosh, a lot of us will be in like a different routine, and different sleeping pattern, possibly, maybe a bit more relaxed. And it's going to be a big shift, I should imagine, right?
A big shift for everybody.
I suppose I was also wondering, like I was just thinking about some young people perhaps that we've worked with, and that maybe struggle anyway to go to school, before all of this happened, and what it might be like for them, because obviously the whole a big part of anxiety is to try and avoid what you fear, and obviously this has given a lot of young people a big reprieve, especially those that are socially anxious about judgment, anxious about peer judgment, anxious about evaluation, anxious about achieving and so on. I just thought, this must be on one hand such an amazing opportunity to avoid some of that, but on the other hand it might make it so much harder then to go back and face that when you've gotten used to actually avoiding all of that. And I imagine that the parents might be thinking, oh gosh, how am I ever going to get this child back to school when I was already like really struggling before all of this? And of course the teachers will be thinking, are they going to come back? So I was just wondering what your thoughts are around that, and what might be some, I don't know. Well, you tell me, I'm very curious. What do you think about that?
I think it's going to be really, really difficult for some people to go back. I think children that get bullied, or are not achieving what they want to be achieving academically, or struggle a lot, or or have sensory issues where they can't deal with the noise of it, or the smells, the lights, the amount of people. I think you're right, they build up that sort of resilience to it, don't they, by doing that every day and facing that every day. And this has been, I think, amazing for some of them anyway, like you say, because they get to not have to go through that every day, but then to go back to it. How do you then, putting yourself in their shoes, how do you then get yourself to face that again, now you've had that rest, that sort of reprieve, like you say? I think it's going to be so difficult for those young people and their parents, I think, because they're the parents that know how much they struggle.
Yeah. Oh, Emma, I think you're absolutely spot on there, you know, and my heart just really goes out to those parents, because it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
They want the best for their child. They know that there's so many legal repercussions to not getting your child to school, of course. And then I think, gosh, as a parent, that's a lot of stress and to cope with. And of course, for the young person, it's huge, facing that what might feel like an insurmountable mountain at the time, you know, at the school gates. So yeah. And I'm just wondering as well, you know, for some parents, you know, single moms and dads, it can be extremely difficult when you don't necessarily have that support family network perhaps around you as well. That can be really daunting. Yeah.
And I was just thinking, there'll be some young people possibly who didn't come to school. I mean, the schools will know this. I'm imagining this. I'm just thinking that it could be some young people who have actually been able to engage maybe better at home with some of the remote work, and have actually been able to kind of communicate with their teachers maybe through. And I imagine, I don't know, I say this from a little bit of experience, I guess, being a parent, but I imagine that teachers may have been more positive, they'll have sent less negative comments about their children's work during this last 6 weeks. I think whatever work kids will have done and sent through to teachers, they will have had a positive comment. And I don't know, I think there's something in this around that going back to, because I was thinking how schools are going to manage manage their discipline and managing. And I think sometimes that maybe that going back to the basics of actually positive reinforcement is so much more productive than the negative reinforcement. You know, the whole when we battle with this as therapists, and we never really talk about it a lot, maybe to our link workers, I think a little bit, who possibly feel the same because they're not in that field, but the whole isolation rooms that kids go to, when they're, you know, the detentions for not having a green pen, that, you know, you're kind of thinking, well, actually, what is that going to look like post, you know, post coronavirus, when they return to school? It's going to look it's not going to look good, is it, to kind of be doing that to children, really, to be honest. So I think there will need to be a different way of thinking in that respect.
That's so interesting.
You know, so many, and there'll be young people maybe who say, well, why should I go back to school when I can do the work at home?
Oh, yeah.
You can put it out there. But then, you know, especially if they're those social, obviously lots of young people will want the social, lots will either want to go back, want that social, the friendships. They might be worried about friendship groups, and am I going to get back to the same group, and am I, you know, all those kind of social interaction worries. But then to another extent, you imagine, how's the friendship group going to work if when they first go back, for instance, there's only a small number of them in school at a certain time, they've got to keep their distance, they've got to you know, what happens at lunchtime, they can't huddle together in their groups, you know. You kind of think, well, what's the point in going back to school if they can't have the positives that school gives them? They might as well be at home doing their work. That's what well, you know, if
that's fair comments.
Absolutely. Well, this weird tempting thing that I can go back, but I can't be near my friends, you know.
Yeah.
That's just weird, isn't it?
That's a fair comment. So I'm just thinking it might not be, this those that enjoy the closeness, and obviously when we are anxious, we do seek some close proximity, and this is very counterintuitive, isn't it? Especially if we are feeling that we want to hug our friends, or we want to just huddle up, or and maybe we won't be able to do that, so it might not be such an instant relief, certainly, Alois. So, but goodness me, you paint. I mean, as you painted that picture,
I'm hoping, Milo, yeah.
Oh, I mean, you guys are just saying things that maybe I haven't even thought about yet. So yeah, you're making my mind just woo.
I think you might as well. Kids might as well not go back until September if they're doing if they're actually if they're going to go back sooner, but they've got to be like, oh no, I can't go near you.
Don't touch this.
You can imagine the bullying that will occur from that, or the telltaling. So and so's been touching so and so, and they coughed in my face. I mean, it will have already been going on before schools closed. I'm sure we're getting it then. I do not envy school. I think there needs to be given a lot of thought and there is in the scheme of things. I think there are, and schools I'm sure are thinking about it, but they are going to be the new key workers, I think, to be honest. And they always have been, but
it's a lot of pressure on school staff as well. I mean, if you're there to teach, you've got the pressure of meeting all of that, what that entails, and then you've got all these complications as well, and it's a lot, I think, for staff to deal with at the best of times. So I hope that I hope some support is in place for both the staff, the young people, and the parents, because there's going to be a need, isn't there? There's going to be a huge need, I think, and I anticipate that. I don't know, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think it's so difficult for school staff anyway, but I think as well the frustration of everybody coming back, and some children have done the work, some children haven't done the work. So the ones that haven't done the work are going to have to be taught the work, whereas the ones that have done the work are going to be frustrated. They're going to be annoyed. They're going to be, well, why have I bothered? It's so difficult because they just can't control what's going on outside now, and some families will not have had the capacity to do the homeschooling and to do all that, and it's getting I really don't envy teachers having to, even just with that bit, to get everybody back on a level playing field, but as well with everything that's gone on emotionally with those families, and also the children that have been in school for the whole time, that have already been going to school. To them, it might not seem as big of a deal.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Emma. It's
their environment.
Yeah, and I suppose it's something about how do we all come together again and form some kind of cohesive group, if you like, called school, right?
Yeah, it's all quite divided, isn't it? There's a lot of divides that's come from this, I think.
No, that's such good points. Yeah, absolutely. Goodness.
It'll be so for some people, because if we're thinking of this in the if schools don't go back this summer term, which is a possibility, they may do. We don't know, again, uncertainty. But there are kids that are due. They're all due some kind of transition, but some are literally due to move to a totally new school.
Yes.
That's huge for them. It's difficult for the schools because all those activities around transition that get both sides, school and young people, get to know each other through those activities, are going to struggle for anything like that to be happening, whether they're even things that get done through the summer term, even summer holidays. You wonder whether how those transitions are going to work. And changes are always afoot, aren't they, with young people? Change comes on a daily basis, and you know, for some people, and that's a big struggle in itself. But these kind of changes that usually and quite often they can have some prediction and some plan. They know that they've got some idea of what happens in July I'll visit my secondary school, and at some point I'll see who's in my form, and at some point, and parents know that as well, so they can kind of they shape that planning for their child, you know. I mean, I was thinking, Emma, about, you know, with you working with the ASD children, that must be something that's worrying parents, and this change, how, you know, all these changes, how they're affecting them.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really worrying for them, because they will struggle with that so much anyway, even with that build up and possibly extra transition work for them as well. But as it's transitioning from year to year even, but if it is from school to from primary to secondary school, they've lost, it feels very on their own, doesn't it? Whereas they haven't had time to say goodbye to their old school, their old friends, their old teachers, and they're not all doing it together. It's very individual now. And I think, with the ASD children and young people, it's just so difficult for them. It's just really overwhelming, like a big overload for them, and they can't always express that as easily. They can't talk about it as easily. It comes out in ways that they don't sort of understand sometimes, that their emotions, they're feeling one emotion but portraying a different one, and it all gets mixed up. And I think it's going to be really, really difficult for them and teachers.
That sounds challenging. And I guess as you were saying that, I was thinking there's something about, at the end of the day, just kind of honing it down to that individual child, to that individual family, and maybe thinking about, well, what is actually underlying here in this particular child's life, you know, with their unique circumstances and their unique condition, or whatever it might be. Because at the end of the day, that's really what it's going to boil down to, isn't it? I mean, some kids will have challenges that other kids won't have, and I guess it's something about communication, really, and trying to understand and have empathy for that situation, for that child. I
think empathy is going to be huge, Natalie, for something that, I mean, we talk about it in our profession. That's what we try to do, you know, with our clients all the time. But I think in school, that's what, and it's going to be hard, but that's what's going to need to be nurtured as much as possible. Like you were saying, that individual approach is empathy, and empathy for parents in these situations, empathy for young people. It's great. It's like gone really back, really down to basics, you know, and empathy for staff, and realize that anxieties will spill out across all of those, you know, people in the system. The anxieties will spill out and will knock on each other, and to kind of have empathy for yourself, I think, is really important, and to have that self-care that actually, you know, acknowledge your own anxieties, and maybe sometimes share some of those with the people you work with, or even the young people when they come back to school. Acknowledge that it's okay to be anxious about these things, and that's something new, because anybody that says they haven't been, I mean, some people cope with it in some, you know, we all cope with it differently, but anxiety faces all of us when in times of uncertainty.
Absolutely.
So,
I think it's so key what you've said there, Losa, and, you know, just finding that sometimes it's okay not to be okay, and then seek that support, because there's so much around, you know, that we can support each other at the end of the day. And, you know, it's all about being a strong team, and just realizing that you're not in it alone, because it can feel pretty lonely sometimes, right? If you're a parent that's struggling, or a young person, or even a staff member, where you have to be professional, and, you know, you've got deadlines and so much pressure all around. So there's something about, it's okay to be vulnerable, and like you say, just recognize actually we are all feeling this anxiety in whatever way. And of course, for some people be more complicated, because I'm just thinking about families that, you know, where there have been losses, and where there have been you know, it's
upheaval, because there'll be upheaval in families
yeah,
just on the basic level of maybe more arguments or more kind of
yeah,
disharmony, or switches and changes from we're getting on all right one day, we're not another day, and those kind of changes can be quite unsettling for people, you know, young people and whoever's
sure.
in the family. But
Yeah.
you know, the things we know that have been happening, we know that there's been a rise in domestic
Yeah.
abuse, and we know that from the figures for Calderdale in itself. You know, people will have lost their job. That brings anxiety. These losses, you know,
Yeah.
parents will have lost jobs, and people from all walks, all areas of life. And I think that's the kind of thing. So it does question. Sometimes we can maybe stereotype families, or put certain types of families in different boxes, and these are coping families. But I think this is going to affect across the board, really.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there, Alo. So we can't make assumptions just because families have always been a certain way. We can't assume that that's just how it is going to be to, you know, continue, because we don't know how this will have affected each family individually, do we? Until we have those, you know, we give that space and time to really hear what's underlying and what's going on and how it has really been for them, really. Yeah, gosh, so much has come out of just these few minutes of conversation, and I know I'm just thinking we very much have sort of looked at, and we could talk about this for hours, couldn't we? Just about how this might impact, and of course all of the challenges and the anxieties, fears, massive. But I guess can we just talk about, maybe just think about a little bit and explore about what are some of, because I know, Losa, you always say about resilience, and you know that sometimes we're stronger than we think we are, or maybe others, we shouldn't assume that they you know, are going to struggle necessarily. Maybe this is going to bring out some growth and resource and resilience in people that might surprise us. I don't know. But what are your thoughts around that? And
I mean, initial thoughts on that, Natalie, as well, are thinking that we've just like thinking on the back of what we've talked about. It all sounds quite negative and stressful. Oh my God, do I want to go back to school and all that? You know, oh my God. But then actually, and we know this from our work with some of the stressful things young people and other people go through, and you guys out there who are listening to us will know this from things that you go through, is that actually as human beings we are pretty resilient, and I think young people are pretty resilient, and the amount of times we think to ourselves, I've seen young people at schools and I think, how do you come to school every day? But I do.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know,
it's very humbling, isn't it?
Just as a kind of safe haven, like, oh yeah, this is a safer place. But you know, it's I think young people are resilient, and they're living. If we think about where the older folk, and some of us will be a lot older, and some of us are still, you know, but you get after about 30, you start getting set in your ways or something, you know, a little bit more set in your ways. And whereas young people, they're adaptable, they're changing. One day they want to be a TV presenter, the next day they want to be you know, they can, and sometimes they are fixed, but they are might adapt, and they might have started thinking about other avenues in the you know, for us it feels like the world has stopped, but I'm not sure whether it will feel like that for young people necessarily.
I think you're right. I think we shouldn't make assumptions, and this part of me thinks they surprise us sometimes, don't they? They surprise us with their ingenuity, their resilience, and they're amazing problem solvers. Sometimes when we ask them the right questions, they're actually really good at coming up with their solutions that might, you know, work for them. So it's really good of us. Thank you.
With this as well, I think a lot of family units will have grown closer together as well through this. They've spent so much more quality time together, and they're going to have been arguments, and they're going to have been it's not going to have been easy, but a lot of families will have built such strong bonds that it might be difficult to go back to school, but actually they've probably learned a lot of skills and a lot of qualities from this time with their families to carry forward then into school, maybe even if it's self-confidence, self-esteem, that they've been shown that they've got this real bond with family, that even that if they go back to school and they are a child that gets bullied, it might not affect them as much. They might be able to be more, do you know what, that's not true. I'm not that person
Yes.
that lets this happen now. I've got that confidence now, I can move forward. Hopefully that has happened with some children and some families. And I think a lot of empathy from parents, because they've been off work as well, so they might have the same anxieties about going back to work. You're in it together as a family, and it's more, you're scared to go back to school, I'm scared to go back to work. Well, let's get through this together. There's a togetherness in there.
Oh, I like that, Emma. That yeah. Yeah, no, it's so true, isn't it? And I mean, that's the strength and the resilience, isn't it? Those attachments that we know is our safe base in life, that we can always go back to, always count on. That's always going to be there, that regular, consistent, safe base that parents offer young people and children. Absolutely. And I like the idea of we're going to face this together. Come on now, you know, we're confident we can do this, and building some of that confidence and instilling and inspiring each other. I like that. I think there's a lot of richness in that, for sure. Yeah, no, great stuff. Yeah, and I'm just thinking, are there any sort of top tips that we can I'm not a big fan of top tips because I think everyone's unique, but I guess anything, I know you guys work really creatively with young people, with parents, and I guess I'm just thinking, any sort of ideas or sort of just sort of, I guess, top tips that we can give parents.
My top tips, and I think this is for school and for these are just the things that come to mind, and they're not necessarily creative in that we'll do this or do that. I think, and I kind of like the idea that creativeness comes spontaneously or comes out of a relationship or an interaction. I'm not always, as a counsellor, I'm not always very good at doing those workbooks or kind of resources that you might use. I know, CBT type of things, we're going to do this, we're going to do this planned activity. So my top tips are a little bit more, I think, on that spontaneity type of front of positive reinforcement. Again, going back to that, I think in whatever, and we're not always great at that, but I think the more we can do that in finding the positives, even in whatever small bits and things that are done, but it being playful. I think playfulness with that spontaneity. So it might be having resources, but being open. So taking that risk to be open and maybe not have things planned, because we're obviously living in a world where it's hard to plan. Try and get used to doing things off the hoof and a little bit kind of off the cuff and just see what happens type of approach. Because often the best things come out, I feel, in that way. Things that just sort of grow out of a question, like, we're sort of like the way we're doing here in this CPD, or a kind of a little let's play a game. The kids who have made up games with Play-Doh and boxes, and that creative being, so allowing that spontaneity and playfulness. And then I think going back, I think what you're saying, Natalie, is trying to incorporate, you've mentioned safe base, and I think that trying to incorporate, well, as much as we've talked about everybody has things differently, and yes, as adults we experience anxiety just like children and young people do, and as parents we experience that, and you can normalize that and you can share that and you can share your vulnerability, but at the same time, children and young people, to grow and have that growth, need to feel they have that safe place. So it's always reminding yourself, those kind of that phrase that we often use, Natalie, in our training, it's about trying to be the bigger, stronger, kinder, wiser person in the situation. And so it's not, and I think that sort of comes full circle. So being bigger doesn't mean being nasty. It's not big nasty. It's kinder, bigger, stronger, kinder, wiser. You can be wise and kind and big, and not just like authoritarian sort of big. So I think that to me feels like a bit of the top tips from me, I think, in some of this uncertain managing things, just to be able to be spontaneous, I think. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I do like that idea, Lois, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that being that safe, bigger, stronger, wiser, kinder, and sometimes that's also for ourselves as well, isn't it? Being kind
Definitely,
to ourselves.
definitely.
You know, I just, somebody said to me the other day, something about if we treat ourselves like, you know, if we treat our best friends like we treat ourselves, we wouldn't have any friends. So there's something about really being our own best friend as well in all of this. And, you know,
I
being
like that, yeah.
friend. Yeah, no, I think this real, it's real wisdom there. Yeah, and Emma, what are your sort of thoughts around that, especially with
I
your,
think,
yeah,
yeah, I think the big thing for me is the inclusivity of it all. That children have always got anxieties and they've always got issues surrounding school, I think. But this is sort of the first time that they've all got the same one, and I think that's actually quite a good thing that can bring them together and make it normalise it and make them feel like they're not on their own, because the teachers are in it, the parents in it, the children are in it, all together. It's not, I think it's about making them feel like they're not on their own by using that, and by using the fact that actually this is everybody, and everybody's experience is different, but we've all got something in common now. We're all as one a little bit.
Yeah.
oh, you know, that's really great. That really resonates with me, because I think there's something about it just being talked about, you know, bring it into the room,
Yeah.
let's talk about
Yeah.
it, let's not pretend that we're not, that we're all okay. Let's just, you know, and I think you can solve anything when we do it together, for sure. And it's just so great to model that, isn't it? That actually there's nothing we can't solve as long as we can do it, you know, together. I love that idea. I really do. Thanks so much, guys. That's great. Yeah, and of course there are, you know, for those that struggle, that might not want to go back to school and absolutely are digging their heels in for whatever reason. It might, you know, it's not always for some people whether that's, you know, something that they just catastrophize, or they just have real intrusive thoughts about, and negative thinking and so on, and just can't face, and have panic attacks at the gate, or panic attacks in the morning just getting ready and so on. I mean, for some of those, just to have the empathy and maybe find the support, albeit, you know, therapy or working with families, and pulling in some of those resources. But I think there's something about hope as well, and just to not, you know, to always maintain that hope.
Yeah. Hope and the questioning there. I'm thinking when you're talking about those anxieties and that panic, and you know, we were talking a bit earlier on, I think, in the session about trying to keep in the here and now, and sort of trying to have some sort of grounding techniques that keep you in the here and now. So you know, having that those things that I'm worried about, well, that's in the future, that's then, and actually now I'm not going to let it take over my here and now, and I can, and we don't know that the answers are going to be like that, what if, and even the panic, the kind of, this will be over in a few minutes, you know, we can get through it, and I've just, it's come to my mind now actually thinking about it in the prime, talking about top tips and anxiety. We always talk about getting through it, and I know I've often said to young people, and they quite like that memory, because some of this is about creating memories as well, or going back to old memories. I remember reading to my children when they were in primary, that primary age, little kids, you know, we're going on a bear hunt. And I remember, I've said this to secondary kids, do you know, can you remember that we're going on a bear hunt book you'll have read at school? You know, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you can't go round it, you've got to go through it.
I love that. I love that. That's so true, because the only way out is through. I know when I was in therapy, my therapist used to say that all the time. She said, Natalie, the only way out is through. It's like there's something about facing your fears, and really realizing that you're more courageous than you think you are, and then having the lovely evidence for that once you've done it. It's the best feeling in the world, isn't it? When you've faced a fear and you've proven to yourself that you can conquer it, however it might feel so scary and so terrifying. And I think that's where it's really helpful to come alongside someone and just
Yes.
set those, you know, those manageable goals, because success obviously breeds success, doesn't it? And it's so good. You feel like you've conquered Mount Everest when you've come through something that's just been so debilitatingly scary. Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. Going on there.
That community feel. I'm just, you know, thinking of the bear hunt again. We're going on the bear hunt. It's like you were saying, Emma, that inclusive community. We're going to get through. We're going to get through it. We can't, you know. And I think that's the spirit. And I think the schools in college have a good, you know, I think there will be a good spirit like that, you know, of we're going to get through it. We're not, this ain't going to defeat us. It sounds very, but, you know, we're not going to avoid it. We can see this is a really challenging issue, but we're going to get through it.
Yeah. No, I think that sounds great. And I think it's like something about having an attitude of, you know, I always say attitude determines your altitude. So positioning yourself and just in your state of mind, and yeah, just getting yourself in that resourceful state and that resourceful mindset, I think can be
seeing
very,
it
very
is,
imperative.
seeing it and believing it, you know, that kind of.
It's true though, isn't it? I mean, our thoughts do determine our emotions and our behavior, and it's all linked together. It's true. Yeah. No. Guys, thank you so much. You're saying so many rich things. I just think, yeah. Gosh, I'm feeling a lot more relaxed now myself as you were saying that. So thank you. But yeah, I think there's also something like you were saying, Alo, so you touched on that playfulness and not forgetting a sense of humor, you know, like laughter, it makes you breathe, and breath is always good, especially the out breath. It just really like letting something go. And I mean, with the little kids, we sometimes blow bubbles, don't we? We like watch it go. Or I sometimes say, well, give yourself a bit of like a worry time where you're just going to spend a bit of time, and that's your worry time. But then once that's done, you're done with the worry, and then go and do something else, or ground yourself in the present. We've got all these lovely techniques that we can use and find what works for that individual, you know. Yeah. So yeah, no, I think I'm feeling like there's a lot more hope, because you can get quite bogged down in all of it can feel quite overwhelming, can't it?
Yeah. I think you've got to find ways of motivating, having that vision, having that motivation, so for tapping into what engages the young people, you know. And again, that'll be different for some, but you know, some of them it might be music, some it might be, and you wonder, they might be tapping into that right now as we speak in their homes, you know, making their TikTok videos and their, you know, but you know, tapping into that, what they find funny and what they find creative and artive, and it's tapping into that, something that that it motivates them to sort of keep buzzing and keep alive, really, isn't it? And keep moving forward and not rolling back, you know, or being stagnant.
That, Alois, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, as you're saying that, I actually felt myself getting a bit excited, because I thought, young people, I mean, this time and them having the space, goodness knows what wonderful creativity and ingenious things they've created. And I just think some of them might be writing music, some of them might be writing songs, some of them might be writing poetry. You know, some of them might be doing amazing art, or like, you know, they've got their interests and their passions and their dreams, and this might just be the mother of ingenuity, and yeah, they may be doing all sorts of wonderful things that they can bring back and share, you know, with us. So I'm really looking forward, in a sense, to hearing some of, like, oh, what you get up to. Yeah, we must never underestimate young people. They're amazing, aren't they? And it's very humbling working with them. It really is. And I think as long as we're curious and we're always open and empathic and want to understand, then I think they're very gracious with us as well. Yeah. Oh. Gosh, guys, the time has gone so quickly, and I think we could spend so much time just talking about this. Is there any sort of just before we sort of close, are there any sort of thoughts that you want to share, just as we sort of round this up?
I think there's a lot more that can be covered, like you say, and I think I'm looking forward to joining more discussions like these over the coming weeks, and we'll, you know, go into maybe things in a little bit more depth, and certain topics, and bringing other people in from other organisations to share their expertise. So I just find it's great to talk. This is another thing. It's our way. This is a good way for us to discussing our ideas and sharing them. I think that's listening to people out there, and that's what I think is a learning point for everybody at schools, or in, you know, is to have your ears open as well as your brain problem solving, and, you know, try and get your ears out wide. Yeah, so it's I think this is a great little scenario for us to do this in as well.
It's good, isn't it? We don't often get the time to talk like this, so it really is good. Emma, anything that you sort of want to say before we go?
Yeah, I think coming out of all that, I just think the amount of positivity that's come out of that is actually more than I thought would come out. And I think it's great that actually the children who want to go back to school, and they'll be fine, there is a lot of children that will be fine going back to school and really will want to go back to school, and that's their positive. And the children that don't want to go back, I suppose there is a positive in that they've had a good experience in this time at home. So there's a positive on both sides. One's struggling in this lockdown, and one's going to struggle when they get back. There's always a struggle, but there's always that counteraction, isn't there, that actually you'll struggle because you've had this good experience at home. So it's finding that silver lining, really, isn't it, and working out that there are good things. It's just that you've got to balance them and maybe keep that good time at home as well as going to school. Make sure you've got that time with your family moving forward as well, that you've valued so much.
So taking what we can and what we've learned and what we've gained from this experience, definitely. Oh, guys, you know, thank you so much. I just want to say, you know, like, you guys come with so much